Let's bring in Susie O'Brien from the Herald Sun, joining us live from Melbourne, and live from Brisbane we've got Leisa Goddard from Adoni Media. Great to catch up with you both again. I've got to get your thoughts first up on this thing that there's a bugbear I've got at the moment is this net zero strategy for our defence forces. This one slipped under the radar. I'm great to see Andrew Hastie and Phil Thompson calling it out now, Leisa. This is just madness, isn't it? I mean, imagine what they're laughing about this in Beijing.
Well, could you imagine what the Australian troops are thinking as well? They're meant to be there, and they want the weapons, they want the armoury, they want the investment, and goodness knows they want the other men and women from this country who will go out there and stand alongside them to defend this country. And yet we seem to have a government who's all focused on woke. So we always say, you know, go woke, go broke. Well, now perhaps you're talking about the Defence Force, it's go woke, go weak. And that, you know, would be have China rejoicing. And I can tell you, when I was in Afghanistan with our troops, I would not have been happy to be in a EV-powered Bushmaster. I'm not sure that there's, you know, any particular place there where you'd be powering one of those up quite easily.
It's just laughable, isn't it,
Nonsense.
Susie? The electric Bushmasters in the wild provinces of Afghanistan. Look out.
Well, you'd be queuing up in the middle of the desert to, you know, find a charger. I mean, how ridiculous. Look, I mean, originally you would think that there's no issue with having ambitious targets for renewables and also, you know, high Defence Force capabilities. But we know that that's not going to be a reality. And at some point, all the rhetoric meets the reality, and you don't want to see a stepping down of Defence Force power, might, spending, etc., just because they're committed to some of these targets. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is absolute insanity. Now, there's been a bit of focus on the election date, the federal election date, over the last few weeks, of course, because everyone's looking ahead to the West Australian election in March next year and whether or not they could overlap, whether, you know, Albo would like the WA election to go first and he could come afterwards. And anyway, he had something to say about it today. Have a look.
I'm focused on governing. That's what I'm focused on. And I'll leave the speculation to others. I have said repeatedly, and I repeat again today, I support 4-year terms, and I wish there was 4-year fixed terms.
There's so much here. Now, firstly, Leisa, I think, of course, the West Australian government, they want to go first. They want him. They'd love him to go early because they don't want the anti-Albo stuff, you know, stuffing up their election. No. But I think they'll go first. They'll have their March election, and he'll go on April the 12th. Is my tip. But give me this 4-year term thing. This is an outrage, and too many people nod their head at it. Name one state government now that's actually made good use of their 4-year term. Name me one government that doesn't need a encounter with voters to bring them back onto the straight and narrow rather than another year in office.
Yeah, look, I think there is some argument. The longer they've got in office, if they're a good government, then that's great because they've got more time to actually deliver on all of the promises that we get and set the agenda and actually put things in motion. However, when it comes to Albanese, right now, I'm sure he's wishing that he had a 4-year term because it would put him, you know, a good buffer zone before he has to go to the election and actually face the Australian people with the polls going in the wrong direction. You know, he may be in that clifftop mansion sooner than he thinks.
Oh, I tell you what, I think you're spot on there, Leisa. Now, the thing is, Susie, I don't think we've seen a good government, one deserving of an extra year, certainly not since John Howard.
Oh, my God, don't even ask me about government, state government in Victoria. We've got kids who are in grade 6 who cannot remember, who weren't even alive the last time we had a Liberal government in this state. It's just getting quite dire. You know, of course, Albo wants 4-year terms. All politicians like the certainty of that. They like the extra time. And, you know, the last 6 to 12 months of governing in any term is always all about the strategy, the date, the timing, etc. As you say, he's got the next phase of his life all worked out. So, you know, he loves the idea of having that kind of certainty. It's
called the Copacabana phase. But I did like Peter Dutton's take on this. He says, how come Albo's talking about a second-term agenda? We haven't seen anything in the first term yet. Have a look.
The Prime Minister's now talking about a second-term agenda. I don't understand what the first-term agenda is of the Rudd government, of the Albanese government. I mean, what has the Prime Minister achieved during this term of Parliament except making it harder for families to pay the bills, keeping inflation high, which means interest rates have stayed higher for longer than in comparable economies, The energy system is a train wreck in this country. The energy regulator's talking about the lights going out, talking about power bills continuing to go up.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good election agenda there, hasn't he, Peter Dutton? That's all pretty telling criticism. And there's another issue unfolding for him in Queensland. Leisa, I'm keen to get your take on this, where the Albanese government locked up with the Palaszczuk, or the former Stephen Miles Labor government, for this quantum computing deal, a $1 billion deal. And now the new Premier, David Crisafulli, looks like pulling out of it. What's the go?
Well, this is what's good about a new government, right? So we are just over 2 weeks into the new LNP government, and David Crisafulli has stood there with his ministry and said, we will basically go through line by line and expose every inflated, every deal that's gone over budget, every project that's over budget, and all of the hidden numbers that are in there from Labor over the last nearly a decade. And what they've done, we've seen a call out on a $5 million overspend with the Olympic venues. We've seen the Burdekin hydro project killed off because it was $36 billion over. And now they're saying to the federal government, listen, Miles committed us to $470 million to help build, to give grants, basically, taxpayer money, to help build the world's largest computer. And they're saying, well, we've already asked questions about this. The tendering process was all very secretive. We didn't get answers when we were in opposition. And now we're going back to the books, having a look at exactly what happened and putting the government on notice, the federal government on notice that, look, you may not get our $470 million of Queensland taxpayer money. We might very well just keep it for Queensland.
Yeah, nothing beats a good bit of a cost-benefit analysis when it comes to taxpayers' funds. Let's talk about households' funds here, Susie, and the cost of living crisis. We're seeing energy prices continue to go up. I noticed that the CEO of Red Energy, a government-owned renewable energy outfit down there in the Snow Hydro, he just jumped up to $1.7 million salary, which is an absolute insult, a pay rise of $350,000. But this comes as we're told that pay rises won't keep pace with inflation in the coming year. It doesn't look like things are going to be rosy for households in Anthony Albanese's election year.
And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because you look at what happened in the US, and Trump, for all his craziness, he spoke to people about the hip pocket. And I remember that on election night, all those Republican voters, they were in the diner somewhere, Pennsylvania, and every single one of them said, I voted for Trump, not because of his craziness and all the rest of it, but because I think he will make it cheaper for me to buy groceries and fill up my car and buy things, clothes for my kids. And that's what they care about. And the government is really failing to rein this in, and they ignore this at their peril. You look at some of these pay rises for some of the energy bosses. Why should the head of Origin Energy, where my bills have gone up 30, 40%, be earning 10 times more than the Prime Minister? That's an absolute outrage. And now we've got all this new data showing that cost of living is going to be a massive problem for the next 12 months.
Look, we're all facing the cost of living crisis around the country, but don't worry, the Defence Force is going to net zero and we're going to get a misinformation and disinformation bill. Try selling that one, Albo. Good luck. Thanks for joining us, Leisa and Susie. I really appreciate it.